Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Quick question. When you're leading a team or growing a business, who helps you think clearly? GrowX Labs offers executive decision support, real-time access to a trusted strategist who helps you navigate tough calls, leadership blind spots, and everything in between. No fluff, no long-term commitment, just fast, honest insight from someone who gets it. If you're a founder or exec and need a sounding board, go to growxlabs.com/mark. That's grwxlabs.com/mark and book a discovery call today. One of the many awesome sound bites or word bites that I see in all of the text between rundowns on Podmatch and LinkedIn that I could start this episode off with. Jonathan McLernon's words, let's have a conversation that truly matters. And let's just start by saying he doesn't do fluff, doesn't do hype. He does real soul-level conversations that move people and invite them to wrestle with truth, courage, and transformation. My goal in this intro is to not only stutter or not to stutter over my words. Holy moly, I'm doing a bang-up job with this. It's also to not give too much away, because if I gave too much information, there's a lot going on in Jonathan's story here. There would be no tease or anything. So I'm going to sum him up here as best as I can, and hopefully my speaking will get better as this hour goes on. So, Coach John McLernon helps people break free from addiction, emotional eating, self-sabotage, and burnout, blending neuroscience, psychology, metabolic health as a part of his NeuroQuit method. He's a survivor of near-fatal trauma, financial ruin, and food addiction. Jonathan rebuilt himself, became debt-free, lost 100 pounds, and overcame crippling anxiety without fad diets or sheer willpower. That is all amazing stuff. And let me just round that out. He is a podcast host of Between the Before and After, and he is also the head coach of Freedom Nutrition Coaching. Jonathan McLernon, welcome to Mark My Words. Other than being hoarse, how you doing today?
You know, and it might just sound more like I've got a radio voice. Ladies and gentlemen, how we doing today? Something like that, you know. So sometimes you just got to roll with what life hands you, because you said, hey, we're going to have an authentic conversation today. And I think every one of your conversations on the show is that. So you get me as I am. I've got some throat coat tea that I'm sipping on here, and that should keep the vocal cords lubed up. Oh boy, what a great way to put that. Should keep the vocal cords functioning for the episode here.
Well, I know what it's like. We talked a little bit before I hit record. I know what it's like just to have vocal issues when you're trying to be at your best. And not only is it vocal, sometimes it's mental, because just in that intro, just had a little bit of trouble spitting some
Mm.
stuff out. And we're on, at least for me, a little more of the back end of the day. So that can happen. But if I don't do speaking like this a few days a week at least and keep it kind of like in shape, I will get very scratchy and coffee and will have to mute myself. And it, I know people like us make this look easy. If you're watching or listening, it may seem easy. It's not as easy as it looks.
Absolutely. Well, something that's not in my bio is that I spent a year as a pro wrestling ring announcer a number of years back. And it was for a reasonably popular indie circuit that pulled, over 500 people to shows at times. And so I say at times because, of course, you're going to have a few shows that don't quite pull as many, but we pulled some pretty good crowds. And it all kind of happened by, by happenstance. Kind of a muscular guy walked into a store that I was running at the time. I used to run a nutrition and supplement store, among other things. And we just kind of got chatting. He was, looking for some protein powder. We got chatting, what we did and whatever. And he was an oil field firefighter or whatever. But on the side, he had this pro wrestling circuit. And I was like, what? Who is that still a thing? And so eventually became a sponsor of his show, which was kind of fun. And then after that, like his ring announcer had to go because he was going for another year at university or something like that. And so I was like, yeah, I'll step in and I'll fill in. So I filled in for a couple of shows and they're like, hey, do you want to keep going? And so it was a good time. But one of the big things about being a ring announcer is you have to keep your voice in shape because you can't blow out your vocal cords before you get to the main event, right? You have to manage, you got to work the crowd between matches. You're part of the show, so you got to go along with the heels, the faces, that kind of thing. And so I had a tuxedo sponsor, and I would come out to Sharp Dressed Man by ZZ Top, and it was a ton of fun actually. And pardon me, but after the show, we'd go to some terrible greasy pub and just eat awful food and drink, and I was like, you know what, this is probably not good for my health long term. And so after a year, I was like, okay, I'm gonna step down, guys, but I've had a ton of fun doing this.
Yeah, no, I have no doubt. So first of all, you have lived like 1,000 lifetimes. You have had quite a lot going on in your life. You are not the first wrestling related person I've had on this show because I know Corey Castle. Oh my gosh, that was 5 years ago. I had him on my show. He
Amazing.
is a professional wrestler, and he's another one who definitely had the gift of gab. I think he also has a podcast, and I feel like if you're a wrestler or related to wrestling at all, you automatically have personality and the gift of speaking.
That's
So,
awesome. Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
I'm definitely going to want to check out Corey Castle at some point in time because I'm sure we'd have a good. I mean, it's funny because when you said a wrestler, I was thinking about another guy that I've had on my show, who basically said pro wrestling saved his life, and that was pretty significant too.
yeah. No, I know that Corey had a really interesting story. I don't. That was like 5 years ago, so I don't want to misquote myself on my own show, but I do know that he had a very inspiring story himself, and I think all of you guys involved in the wrestling world kind of like entrepreneurs. We all kind of have that similar thing that can be definable, but also not definable. And yeah, that is one of the things that I love about doing this show. And I'm sure that's
Yeah,
one of the things you love about doing your podcast. And let me get kind of like a little bit on track with your actual
yeah. Of
journey
course. I just threw you
because
a curveball there because I was like, this one isn't in the profile.
that's okay. No, we like curveballs on Mark My Words. So the more curveballs that you can throw and the more diversity we can have in the conversation, frankly, the better the conversation is, because one of my rules for this show is to bring like as unique of a story as I can to every episode. Because if we had the same exact kind of story over and over, it just wouldn't have the same vibe. So, uh, yeah, you are free to throw any pitches you want, a slider, a curveball, a fastball,
That's awesome.
enough baseball analogies here. Let me ask you, because you studied chemistry in school,
Yeah.
and it takes a smart person, certainly smarter than me. I only passed chemistry in high school because I showed up every morning and asked for help. And I still didn't get a lot of the stuff they were teaching. So I know you gotta be pretty smart to actually take a stab at studying chemistry in college. So I'd just be curious to know, uh, was that something you were passionate about? Were there any other passions as you got into adult life?
I'll say sort of. So I grew up in a small town in British Columbia, so the westernmost province in Canada. And so when you mentioned baseball, I was like, oh man, all of Canada was cheering for the Blue Jays last year, and we were devastated and heartbroken. I'm not even a baseball fan, but I became a baseball fan because I was like, man, that'd be really cool. Because I did
Yeah.
remember the 1992 and 93 World Series wins by the Toronto Blue Jays when I was a kid. And so a little bit of nostalgia there. And it really looked like they could have pulled it off, and I don't know how they didn't. I'm not going to say it was rigged because that's silly, but it was just a couple of weird breaks that just but that's life, right? And you get knocked down, you get back up, just like the Chumbawamba song, I think it was. I
Yep.
get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never going to keep me down.
Yep.
And so that's a bit of it. So, but yeah, so I grew up in a small town. And I grew up pre-internet, as you can tell by the gray in my beard. You don't get this in your 20s unless something went seriously wrong. So I've been around a while, and so I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but I was like, maybe I guess I'll be a teacher. And well, if I want to be hireable, I wouldn't be like an English teacher or a social studies teacher because there's lots of those. Probably not a biology teacher. So it's either going to be chemistry, math, or physics. And I kind of settled on chemistry because I felt like it was a little bit less difficult than physics and math, but more difficult than biology, social studies, or English. And so that and art. Sorry, art teachers. You do a valuable service to society. But I was trying to pick the one that would give me the best chance at employment. And I was pretty good at chemistry as well. I mean, I ended up being a nanotechnology researcher at University of Victoria, studying some pretty interesting stuff. But in reality, research is, I call it success through failure. You test something, it doesn't work. You change a variable, you test it again, maybe it works, and so on. Experimental research can be a really tedious, drawn out kind of process, and it just wasn't vibing with the way that my brain works. I was in my final year and getting, basically lined up to move straight into a PhD program. And I was like, you know what? I just don't want to do this for 4 more years. I don't care about the letters after my name, and I don't think anybody else will. And so I went and joined the Navy and became a Marine engineer instead.
Wow. You are a smart guy, because just all those things that you named off, you were like, yeah, biology, chemistry, this, that. Like, whoa. The only thing that I ever really seriously thought about doing is what I've done with my whole career, which is television production.
Okay.
I Yeah, I really did not know. No, I mean, I always really had a passion for it. So I think I always knew, but it's like a little bit unconventional. So I know I had, especially one of my parents, I try not to call them out, even though that parent is no longer with us, but they were definitely like not sure about me going into television production, and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not a conventional path. But somehow, some way, I found my way, and I've had some awesome jobs, and I've had an awesome journey with it. But
Oh, yeah.
not not everybody just kind of like knows. Like, I knew from a very early age I liked playing. Like, again, I have a couple grays in my beard. I would take apart
Yeah, yeah,
black and white TVs and look
yeah.
inside of them, and was really fascinated with like the TV guide. Like I was just this weird 7-year-old kid who loved all this stuff. And I think I always knew I wanted to do it. And basically everything from math to chemistry, basically everything you just named off was just not in my wheelhouse. And without the help of teachers and just whatever is floating around the universe that guided me, I wound up getting through it because I did not have the ability to do any profession to do with anything mathematical or scientific. So kudos to you.
Well, I'm very curious, and my mom tells me that, like, as a kid, there was times where she just wanted to tell me to shut up and let her think for a minute, um, because I just was intensely curious about how everything worked and wouldn't stop asking questions. And I have a 5-year-old who does that, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. Like, this kid asks questions about everything, and I try to be very, very patient with it, of course, because I love that he's curious about how the world works, and I want to foster that curiosity and creativity and things like that. But there's definitely days where I'm like, okay, you're just about leading me to an existential crisis here, kid. Like, you ask questions so deep that I'm just like, I don't even know anymore. And so it is amazing what kind of questions a 5-year-old can come up with that make you scratch your head and go, I don't know if I ever thought about it like that. And how and then, because here's the other thing, I could sort of explain something at a high level. So for example, my wife is from Australia, and so we go back and forth between Canada and Australia. I'm very fortunate that I can work remotely in terms of what I do, and so that allows us to go over there. We can stay with family over there. I can work remotely while we're there. When we're on the airplane, he's sitting here asking me how the airplane flies, and I'm like, okay, so how do I explain lift and flow and aerodynamics and jet propulsion and things like that? One of the real challenges is, like, you don't know something until you can compress it into an analogy that works. I think that's a really good way to figure out if you actually understand a concept or not. And so I'm like, man, how do I explain like jet propulsion and lift and aerodynamics to like a 5-year-old? And so sit there and try to explain. And I honestly don't I couldn't think of the explanation I gave right right at that time. But that's sort of the way that gets challenged. And you know, you say smart, and I am pretty smart, and this is not me trying to be arrogant. I got my brain free of charge. I always tell people that so they know that I don't think I'm better than anybody else. Watch me try to kick a soccer ball and you'll laugh. Watch me try to hit a baseball. It's kind of painful to watch, right? But ask me to solve a problem, and I'm pretty good at it. So I just know like where I'm good or where my strengths lie. And I think this is the mistake that people make, is they seem to be afraid to identify what they're good at. And but I'm like, I do what I do because I know what I'm good at. And I don't do other things because I know I'm not good at those things. And so but it took me till I was nearly 40 to figure out my lane, to be honest, though.
Yeah, I can really relate to that because up until I got to be close to my 40s, I never would have thought about doing a podcast or anything like this because
Mm.
basically with me being born with like rare syndrome, cleft lip and palate being a part of that, and
Mm.
just having all the stuff fed into my brain for all those years, it's like, who's gonna want to listen to me? Who's gonna want to watch me? And I know that at least some of the reason I wanted to be involved in like media and broadcasting and all of that is because I think deep down inside, I wanted to be like on camera or behind the mic, and I wanted to do those things. I just didn't think that I had like the right look or the right sound. And luckily, around the time that I turned 40, I met people who were like I was going to networking events in my area when I lived in the DC area, and there were quite a few people who were encouraging me and saying, you should try creating content. And some people started asking if I had a podcast, and they were like, you should do a podcast. And I'm like, what? why would I make a podcast? I've never thought about doing anything like that, like seriously.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but by just taking, leap of faith and just kind of like listening to that support, I went ahead and did it. And now here we are, 6 years
yeah,
later, almost 200 episodes into this.
yeah.
And it's amazing how things can change.
Well, my own foray into podcasting was a bit random as well. Um, I've been working for myself since 2015, so well over a decade. Uh, Life is very different now in the online space than it was 10 years ago or even 8 years ago. But even then, I was starting to feel the burnout from trying to sort of keep up algorithmically, produce content, pitch in the DMs, all this kind of stuff for what it is that I do. And it just so happened that Facebook must have read my mind like it does with everybody and fed me up this ad for a podcast guest matching newsletter service. Like you get featured every so often in this newsletter as a guest looking for shows or something like that. And so I started with that one, but I found that and at one point I even paid I think it was over $200 US to get featured in that newsletter, and I got 6 interviews. And I was like, man, that's not great math. I'm like, if I have to work that hard. But the idea I liked is I get to share my ideas with other people's audiences, because I had a small audience. Like, I had a successful business for having a very small audience, because I am quite good at what I do. And I'm quite a good communicator for the most part. And people are going to really think, man, this guy really thinks highly of himself. Remember, it's just I happen to know where my skill set lies. I also know what I don't do well. But so the idea of podcasting appealed to me. I didn't know anything about it. And I was like, who would listen to me talk? But I'd done Facebook live shows before. I'd been a pro wrestling ring announcer. I spent time on a microphone before. And so I started doing interviews. And of course, I had this idea about how podcasting was going to work. I was like, oh, sweet, I'll do an interview. People will download my lead magnet. They'll sign up for my email newsletter. And when they sign up for my newsletter, then I'll start communicating with them. And then someone's going to book a call with me. And it was just going to become a type of funnel, as we call it in the business world, right? And nobody was downloading my lead magnet, for starters, because I didn't know what podcast metrics really were. If you get more than, I think, 40 to 45 downloads per episode, you're in the top 50% of all podcasts globally. Podcast metrics look different than reels and shorts and things like that, But along the way, everyone was asking, well, when are you going to have your own podcast? And it just seems like this thing, when you are a podcast, when you're guesting, everyone's like, well, you should have your own podcast too. Podcasters are very encouraging. The podcast community is amazing, because I think anybody who takes it seriously understands the level of passion that goes into it, because it's a lot more passion than revenue for most people. It's not that you can make $0 or anything. And Podmatch is fantastic. Alex Sanfilippo, founder of Podmatch, or co-founder with Jesse and Alicia, just great human beings. And they're very passionate about helping people keep in the space. So I started looking for other podcast matching services, which led me to 2 other ones. And I had this guy on my show, and he's like, you should try this one called Podmatch. And I was like, sure, okay, I'll give it a try. I tried it out. And so then I was like, okay, I want to figure out my ROI. I'm paying money to be on all these platforms, to get on shows, to try to generate business. I was trying to figure out, how does this actually translate into business for me? How many interviews am I doing? What is my cost per interview? And from that, how much revenue am I generating? And lo and behold, Podmatch seemed to blow everyone else out of the water. So I made a video talking about these different platforms, compared 4 different platforms. And I emailed it to the founders of each of these platforms and said, here's the strengths and weaknesses of your platforms. Here's what's working well, what's not. Here's what your competitors are doing. And Alex was the only one who responded to me. And he said, man, I'd love to get on a call with you and talk about what you're learning. And I said, sure. I was like, you want to talk to me? Okay. And so I got on a call with him and I explained everything. And he was like, this is amazing. This is so helpful. This data is so useful. And so he's a very forward thinker in this space. And so that got me onto Podmatch. And, from there, the rest is history. And that's how we eventually ended up getting connected as well.
First of all, Alex is amazing, and I can also vouch for that. And it's so funny when, first of all, your story of how you got into podcasting and how you found Podmatch is really cool. I, for one, am just this really, at least I personally think I'm just this very open-minded person, maybe to a fault, a little too open-minded. But I know when I first started doing this, I was fortunate enough to round together a bunch of people that I knew from either my networking circle or just from real life somehow. I was a blogger for a while. I'm actually trying to get back into it a little bit, but life has been busy, so that's been kind of on the back burner. But nonetheless, I just kind of rounded people up, and I know the next year after that one, I went to Facebook because I wanted to see if I could actually find people to bring on the show that I didn't really know, and
Mhm.
whether I could like actually take it up a step. So I feel like it's been like taking it up a notch like every year. And I know in 2021, right around the time I was trying to find people on Facebook, that's when I just happened to stumble across Podmatch. And for whatever reason, it just sounded like something that I wanted to try. Obviously the cost for joining was, absolutely amazing. And
Mhm.
it's been an incredible experience. And I too can speak to meeting Alex, like just haven't met him in person, but I've talked to him. I've actually spoken at Podcasting Made Simple, and
Yeah,
it was just he's just been so encouraging, and the community of podcasters have really helped to keep me going. And just
absolutely.
I'm somebody who's super resourceful and can just kind of like rely on themselves to get, motivated. And I guess many of us who are entrepreneurs have that kind of thing in common. But I've
Yeah,
also
yeah.
learned as I've gotten older that I need support. And that support has really helped. And I think that's a big reason why we're here today and why I'm still doing this.
Absolutely. And Alex, Alex, if you listen to this episode, it's going to sound like this is the Alex Praise episode. It's all right, buddy. We know you're human too, but we both greatly appreciate it. One thing I wanted to call out that he did is he's also very, very smart in business, and but he's very humble, right? So he's not going to tell you this, and he's going to give credit to a lot of other people as well. But he looked at this problem, and I think this is where we kind of connect. So we look at a problem and we go, how do I solve this problem? He looked at this problem and said, everyone starts podcasting and then leaves. How do I help them? And why do they leave? They leave because they can't make money in podcasting. They can't make enough money to make it worth it. So we need to think about something different. So he came up with this revenue sharing model and took 50% of their profits and he puts it back into podcasters' pockets. So he's like, I will literally, you will earn back you pay to be on this platform. But if you host enough people, you will earn back that money by being active on this platform. And we keep more people on podcasting. And if we keep more people on podcasting, our podcast quality keeps going up. And if our quality keeps coming up, we're a more desirable platform. And I found that every other platform was basically kind of just treating us like a source of revenue. He treats us like people and community. And so for anyone out there who's like in business, you can learn a lot from this when you treat people like humans, and especially in the age of AI. I don't go too much down the AI rabbit hole. AI is a useful tool, no question. Being human, you were talking about getting back into blogging, and the word trend slop came to mind. Like there's so much garbage content being dumped onto the internet, and you go, how do I even like break through the noise? And I should just start a blog being like I wouldn't actually do this, but because I'm Christian, but the effing human blog. And I would be like, I'm just gonna write like a human in a way that no AI can possibly write, and people will literally read my blog just because they know, without a question, that AI cannot generate this stuff. And that would what do you do in the age of AI? Pardon me, is you double down on being human. I mean, why am I still in business in the age of AI, the age of information, the age of Google? Is because they cannot actually mirror or mimic being human. They can imitate to a certain extent, but what you really have is an expensive parrot. Obviously I'm oversimplifying slightly, but you have an expensive parrot. And so it can only learn on what already exists on the internet. And so you need, like, your edge is doubling down on being human. Sorry, there's my passionate rant for, like, in the age of AI, understand the tool that it is and know that your advantage is doubling down on being human.
I totally agree with that. I know I have thought about just my role as a human being and in this particular era and what I can do just to separate myself from technology. And I know growing up, I was told quite often that I'm a good writer. And I think like language and, just all that kind of stuff. That's actually, if I had to pick another career outside of television, and I don't know if there were too many out there, especially available at a college level, that I would have picked from. But I do think that getting involved in like language or being an English teacher is something that I would have probably tried to do. And I
Absolutely.
know that I pride myself in writing my own material and just with blogging, writing my own blogs. My
Yeah.
episode summaries are written by me. I don't rely on AI because at this point, as much as I like AI and I use it for a lot of things, I am almost like, wait a minute. I spent all those years like refining those skills, and I know I have a good skill set, and now I'm just gonna give that to AI to do? Like, I don't know about that. I think I have too much pride and believe in my ability too much to even like people talking about creating AI podcasts. And I know that being a podcast host is a process as far as like speaking, just public speaking in general, and get better at it. It's a real process. And I've
Yeah,
come such a long way that unless I just wanted to do an AI thing just to see what would happen, I think 99% of what I do is not going to be put out via AI. It's going to be
for sure.
me because I've come too far and I also really like speaking. So I
Absolutely.
can't, that's my take on that.
Well, I'm going to give two free shout outs to two different YouTube channels who don't know that I exist and probably never will, and that's totally okay with me. One is this gentleman named Mo Bitar, Bitar, Mo, just Mo. And he's I think he must be a coder or a programmer or whatever, and he just calls out the AI nonsense. He calls it, he's like, CEOs are literally getting delusional talking to Claude, and he cites very specific examples. He's, look at this happening. They're literally drinking their own Kool-Aid and getting hyped up on, like I call it an expensive parrot. I realize I'm reducing it just a little bit in terms of what it can do. AI is useful. But it's very refreshing to see that. And one of the big things that I've been worried about, the terms that I've used, and I don't know if anyone else uses them, but I call it my cognitive sovereignty. So I want to retain my cognitive sovereignty, my ability to think and reason. And so I went into like the custom instructions. And the funny thing is, like, I actually had ChatGPT help me shape this very specifically to like work against its native programming, where it's like, you cannot respond until I give you a response, basically. I want, the instructions got a lot more detailed to work with how its programming works, but essentially it's, you can't respond until I give you my response first. And because I know I could put like, apple species, and it could write a PhD level thesis on apple species because it can draw from previous PhD theses on apple species. Wow, I almost made a rap song there. Theses
Yeah.
on apple species. But the paper would be feces. There, you know what? You didn't know you were going to get some freestyle on like apple species, feces, and PhD theses. There you go. The plural forms of
Well,
these things.
let me use my cognitive sovereignty to shift the conversation. This is actually
Yeah, yeah.
really interesting. We could probably write out the rest of the episode on this. I love this topic, and it's not often that I actually like talk shop about podcasting itself on this
Yeah, yeah.
show. So I think it's important for us to talk about all of that. And certainly cognitive sovereignty is another thing that is important to talk about. And I have to think myself, use cognitive sovereignty just to remember that phrase. But you have this like incredible story, and I want to make sure that you're able to kind of like tell the story of how you became uh, a coach and just all this stuff. Like you became debt free, and I know it's not
Yeah.
easy to wipe out debt. I've been there with that and have my own success story, and just all the stuff that you've been through. I will let you decide. Use sovereign,
Yeah.
oh my god, cognitive sovereignty on your end to, oh boy.
Nanotechnology, marine engineering, cognitive sovereignty. I've been a power line technician as well, so I used to build high voltage utilities until an injury forced me out of that trade. So how did I get to being a coach? Well, I will say I do have sort of an inherent ability. Again, this is, and I call it a gift, right? Because remember, I got it free of charge. But it's okay to know what you're good at. From a young age, I seem to have a knack for like spotting patterns and sort of and this intense curiosity and wanting to figure out how things work. But what good is it discovering something if you don't share that discovery with someone? And so I would excitedly want to share my creations and my discoveries with people. Make no mistake, I was kind of an awkward kid growing up because I saw the world through a different lens. Nowadays, the kids call it neurodivergent, however you want to call it. That's okay. But back then, I was a nerd. Excuse me, I was seen as a nerd. I was seen as like different. I had friends, but I was a bit of an outcast in a sense. I wasn't one of the cool kids. I sort of worked my way into that circle by becoming very good at basketball and earned some respect in that way. And, once I went to university, it was like, oh, hey, it's okay because I got out of my small town of 2,000 people and I went to a university with 20,000 people. So I went from, a little town of 2,000 people and like, no internet till the mid 90s when I was an early teen, to go into university where there's a bunch of people who are all quirky and weird and think differently. And I was like, oh, it's okay. I'm not that weird. It was just my little town didn't kind of know what to do with me and I didn't know what to do with it. And that started me on this journey. I coached basketball. I taught some of my friends how to read when I was in elementary school. And so there seemed to be this thing where I always ended up in some sort of position or role where I was like guiding someone or teaching someone, or, I ended up like mentoring young chemistry students and some math students and things like that. So I would make a few bucks on the side, like tutoring and things like that. So I knew there was kind of a knack for it. But the idea of like being a coach that gets paid to help people didn't really cross my radar because I still had my small town mentality on. It was just like, get your job, earn your wage, get your pension, retire. Like that sort of setup. And buy a house, maybe have a wife and kids along the way. I didn't plan on going, all right, I'm going to travel the world, nearly die, come back, build a business, lose everything, lose my mental health, and then sort of rebuild myself from all of that. And I know that's a lot of like big themes compressed into a small window of time. And, maybe we'll come back and explore some of these things in more detail. Cause hey, why not do a part 2 at some point? So I'm just going to like give, but what I will say is I would not be doing today what I'm doing had I not gone through what I went through. And so I've kind of learned to, like, I wouldn't put up my hand to go through like nearly being murdered. It's not a fun thing. It's not a fun thing to go, like, I didn't even know what trauma was. It wasn't in my vocabulary. I grew up in a small town in Western Canada. I grew up as a part of a small, like, Christian religious group that, well, that'll be a story for another time. I still am a Christian. I just have a different way of thinking than necessarily how that group operates. But so I had a very small, like, world kind of mindset. But I had a brain that wanted to explore big things. And so there was this constant also underselling myself and talking down to myself and being hard on myself and what I would call like giving my gifts away to other people. And so they would basically rent my brain, get everything, all the value out of it, and then discard me. And it sounds very harsh to kind of put it that way, but that happened to me on multiple occasions where I would get a contract and like work with a company, help them develop something, and then they just get rid of me. And actually, four times, four different American companies this happened with. And I was like, but you know what this really was the universe. I think I'll call it the universe. I don't really, I believe in God. But anyways, for everybody else out there, we'll just say the universe just kept pushing me in this direction of like, there's this thing, this gift that you have, there's this thing that you do, and you keep handing it away to other people. And we're going to leave you with no choice but to do something yourself. But along the way, we're going to equip you with a bunch of really hard experiences that are incredibly difficult to dig out of, but you're going to start to figure out what you're capable of, but also what your limitations are. And that way, you don't get too big in your head, but you understand what you do well, so that when people come to you, you'll be an effective guide. And so I often tell people, look, I'm a guide by your side, I'm not a sage on the stage. I got the t-shirts, I've been through the poop, like I've had a challenging but also very adventurous life. So now, like I'm a health coach. I'm a board certified health coach. Personal trainer, fitness, nutrition, sleep science, stress management, addictions counseling. Like I have a lot of pieces of paper with my name on it. They're all tools in a toolkit. Because ultimately, what am I doing? I'm helping people solve problems. I'm offering a slightly different perspective than they have, but also helping them tap into their inherent wisdom and ability. Because I don't think I'm the only gifted person on the planet. I think everybody I meet has gifts. So I'm like, man, why don't we try to unlock those in you? Why don't we help you see what you do well as well? Because I'm not in competition with you. You have something to offer that's different than me. So let me help you see it differently. I meet people who beat themselves up. I meet people who are so hard on themselves when they're trying to do stuff. And it's like, I meet people with what I call, it's not my own term, but unconditional positive regard. I go, all right, you're here. You got a problem with something. You maybe have a problem with a substance or whatever, but we're going to figure out why this behavior exists. And let's take away this idea that it's because you're a moral failure. And just let's say this is a problem that your brain has started to use this substance, behavior, pattern, whatever, to solve. So there's a reason or a need behind that. We're going to try and help you solve that because we're going to support your brain in another way that helps you put that thing out of business. Whether that's food, whether that's alcohol, whether it's nicotine, whether it's cannabis, and so on. That's what we're going to do. And that's what eventually culminated in my NeuroQuit method. And so right now, my public-facing company is still Freedom Nutrition Coaching, but there is another, I'll name it because it's going to be public, and maybe by the time someone listens to it, it will be public, Neuro New Health. It's this idea, like a lot of my work has become, well, it's I came up with some term, like I'm a multigration specialist or something like that. And it was my mouth like tripping over some words I was trying to say. I was trying to explain that like I integrate multiple domains from fitness to nutrition to neuroscience to psychology to addictions framework, and I am a psychology student as well, and I have a previous psychology background in my earlier studies. So I put a lot of things together and condense it down into, you have a problem, let's put on our thinking caps and let's work together, let's collaborate and figure out a way to solve that problem. I'm going to offer you some ideas. You're going to put it into practice. You're going to come back and give me feedback and tell me this works, this doesn't. We're going to refine and iterate until we get to this place where you can take this and run with it. And you feel confident in yourself. You feel equipped in yourself. And you know that you can sustain this. And it's like you get to have training wheels. You get to crash and burn. You get to fail because you have a supportive net waiting for you. That's me, waiting to help you out. And I'm not the hero of your story. You're the hero of your story. I'm just the person that believes in you. I'm the Robin to your Batman. And I love being that. And so that's really what I do.
I love it. Really, I feel a real connection. Not only, I mean, we've lived different lives, obviously, and have had different obstacles and kind of like different ways in which I think we've been humbled. But I also feel like we have similar mentalities as far as like what we're hoping to accomplish, because not only am I doing all of this for myself and because I enjoy doing it and have learned that, not to toot my own horn, but I've gotten enough feedback that I guess I'm pretty good at doing all of this. So that definitely drives me to keep going. But I also feel like because of everything that I've been through, I feel like I have a lot to offer as far as like
Mm,
encouraging people and keeping them kind of like afloat. Because there's a lot of people who I like going on TikTok, and I haven't been live on TikTok in a while, but I used to go live a lot. I used to go to a lot more like live creator rooms and stuff, and
mm,
I would just come across so many people who would say, "Oh man, I wish that I could like do like TikTok live or have a podcast or speak or whatever,"
mm,
and they don't realize that they do actually have more of the tools available and more, and I'm not talking about physical tools, just like the tools that they were, God given. And,
mm, mm,
they don't realize that when I'm hearing stuff like that, oh, I can't do it, or
mm,
my voice sounds weird. I'm like, are you kidding me? My voice sounds weird, but here I am. I'm doing it anyway, and I took that leap of faith, that bet on myself, and I don't know why. I have a couple different ideas for why I've been crazy enough to do this and some other things in life, but
mm.
I think ultimately I've learned that you gotta take a chance on yourself, and
Yeah.
you don't want to get to a certain point in your life where you're like, ah, I wish that I would have done X, Y, and Z. Like, if I had just said today to my wife, hey, I am going to start a podcast. I'm going to call it Mark My Words or whatever. And
Mm, mm.
instead of like starting it 6, 7 years ago when I was really thinking about it, like, that's a lot of time that you lose. Like, look at what I would have lost if I hadn't just
Oh,
gone
yeah.
ahead and seized the day and did it. So
Absolutely.
I try on my own accord to teach people, even though I don't have like certainly don't have a formal coaching business or anything like that.
Mm, mm.
But I definitely try to teach as many people as I can to like, look, you gotta just kick a lot of that stuff to the curb and believe in
Absolutely.
yourself and just go for it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna just push back on something you said there. You said you're kind of good at this, and I said no, you are good at this. You're allowed to drop the hedge words and the weasel words, and just acknowledge you are good at this because not only is it like natural ability, it's also hard won. So you've put in the reps, you've put in the work to cultivate the skill set, and we often feel like, well, what are people going to think if I say that I'm good at something? I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you know what? Because there's a difference between recognizing what you do well and saying, I am better than you because of what I do well. And that's the thing I had to learn. And the reason I'm passionate about this is because I used to struggle so deeply with self-loathing and self-hatred, and I thought I was just like worthless and hopeless and useless. And how could everyone thinks I'm smart if only they knew what a loser I was, and how, it was so self-destructive. And it took somebody else seeing in me and kind of like giving me permission to say, hey, you're actually good at this. Like you have ability, and you're even allowed to acknowledge that you have ability. Just don't let it like make you lift it up. That's all.
Well, that's, for as good as somebody can be as an individual, as resourceful, as motivated, whatever word you want to throw in there, I really myself have learned that we need support. I think
Yeah,
you, even if you're a solopreneur and you're basically running a business on your own, like having a podcast is basically running something on your own, unless you have a
absolutely,
co-host or a producer behind you. I pride myself in being a producer and host, but
absolutely,
uh, I mean, you need like that support in some way, shape, or form. And I finally started learning that as I got older, and it feels good to have that. And I think for all of the gifts you might have as
Yeah.
far as being motivated, smart, etc., etc. I think having that support, that community, whatever it is, it
Mhm.
definitely goes a long way as far as
Sure does.
keeping you afloat and keeping you going.
Well, I would say one of the greatest mistakes or myths that exists in maybe our modern sort of cultural consciousness is this idea you have to figure it out yourself. I am here today not because of my inherent gifts or abilities, but because other people believed in me, saw something in me, encouraged me, taught me, mentored me, and didn't give up on me. And this is so important, as you're talking about. It's so important that we have other people around us. And I don't like to go back to AI. If you talk to AI all the time, it's gonna make you think like you have some sort of universal theory that no one's ever thought of, and you're a savant or something like that. No, get human grounding around you, but get human support as well. This idea of a self-made person is silly. Like the knowledge that I have, the way that yes, maybe I've packaged it in a unique way. Maybe I've created something proprietary, which is great. But I'm building on the knowledge of like, a psychology researcher from, I don't know, 400 years ago or 200 years ago or whatever, who studied human beings, and he didn't have the internet, he didn't have libraries, he had curiosity and he had theories. And we might look back and kind of laugh at those theories now, but it's like, how arrogant could we be when we think, yeah, put you back 200 years ago, put you back 400 years ago, take away everything you know, put you in some little village where electricity doesn't exist yet, and then you have this curiosity. You don't even know that, like, what is a virus? And so we stand on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of people who've gone before, who've studied, who've been curious, who've learned, who've explored, and we benefit from their work. And so again, for any of us to ever really get lifted up, it's like, remember, like, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these pioneers who went before you, who did the hard work without nearly the same number of tools. But on the same token, what's really cool is we live in this wonderful time of opportunity, this era of opportunity, where again, double down on being human. In the era of AI and trend slop and stuff like that, double down on being human, because it's going to serve you very, very well in the future.
I totally agree. And I know for all of the great advances that we've had in technology, still think at the end of the day, you gotta be the one behind your own success and even non success. And I think
Mm.
that, these things that are out there now, they gotta be treated as tools. And, at the end of the day, you just gotta be reliant on you. And I also want to know, I love what you said about, so many years ago. I think even if you go on YouTube and you watch like just some of the things that pop up in my feed of just like regular people talking about X, Y, and Z, you will see like such a big difference. And it's not because they, were not smart or whatever. It's just that, like, I think it shows you just how much we've already evolved just from all of these awesome tools that technology has given us. Because I know for a fact I wouldn't like I wouldn't be near as smart as I am without all of the tools that are available. That it's just amazing that everything is like at our fingertips now, and I'm at the risk of sounding like an old man, but I mean, it's amazing. It's a totally different world.
Yeah. Well, I'm at the age in my life where I'm embracing the gray in my beard, and I'm going, look, I've earned this, and I'm middle aged, which means I don't bounce back as quickly from sports and workouts and things like that. But what's really cool, the recent moon mission around Artemis, whatever people want to think about it. Look, those astronauts are 49 and 50 years old. That's when we're reaching like the peak of human cognition, and this is what's kind of exciting for me. Is I'm still not even reaching like peak human cognition yet in my life. I'm still learning and discovering and growing in things. And I think a part of it stems from, as your physical abilities begin to diminish to some extent, that like you rely more on your accumulated life wisdom, and what you have isn't all recorded on the internet. Some of it's in your head, and if it's not recorded on the internet, AI doesn't know about it. You have something unique and proprietary to offer, and that's what's great, right? And so
Right.
it's like don't be totally intimidated by this and by this, sort of brave new world that we're in. Just again, maybe this is my message for today: is double down on being human. Double down on being human. Double down on community. Double down on connection. Get outside. Get away from be on the screen and watch this. Absolutely, but like get away from screens too. I have floor time with my kids. Right, I get down and I build couch forts with them, and I literally call it floor time. And I think it's absolutely essential. Is I put my phone off to the side, and my kids they're like, Dad, do you need your phone? No, I don't. Right now, I want to be present with you because you're two little beautiful humans who I am very blessed to have in my life, and so I want to be present with you, not my screen. I spend enough time on screens.
Well, I'm going to double down on being a responsible host and
Yeah,
also responsible human being who's going to remove us from the screens. And I could keep this conversation going all day. I just feel like we could bounce off of each other all day. But I am going to give you the opportunity now to tell us how we can find you, how we can work with you. Anything else that you want to add can also be thrown in.
yeah. freedomnutritioncoach.com. So it's a website where you'll find you can reach out and connect with me there. The future website will be neuronewhealth.com. So NEURONEW health.com. It may not be live yet, but it will be soon. That's the new project. My Substack is called Wrestling with Truth. So for those of you who might be Christian or have faith, that's where I wrestle with my ideas around life and spirituality and try and figure out why we're on this floating rock going through space. And so probably those are the best ways. And then my podcast, it is on a hiatus for right now because having young children, I found that it was taking time away from them. So I did put it on hiatus, but it will be back eventually, probably when they're in school. But between the before and after, there's over 130 episodes published of stories of people who faced significant adversity in life and overcame adversity. I wanted to catalog their stories, which is why we called it Between the Before and After. And so you're welcome to check that out as well.
Well, certainly when I dug into your podcast and really just everything, all the materials I have available, I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface on you and what you do, but you summed it up really nicely and very quickly there using cognitive sovereignty, which is something that I can use around the house that's going to probably annoy my wife because I say the word autonomy a lot, and she doesn't like that I say autonomy and a couple other words. So,
Well, throw agency in the mix as well. Personal agency, right?
yeah,
The ability to
I
act.
mean, but
Yeah,
she puts up with it. She's amazing.
that's awesome.
But
Kudos to your wife.
yeah, no, kudos to her for showing enough autonomy on her end to put up with all those big words. But anyway,
Yeah.
Jonathan McLernon, thank you so much for being on Mark My Words today. This was an amazing conversation, and I just want to quickly point out that just listening to your 30-second little soundbite on Podmatch, like that right there, I'm like, yeah, this guy is going to be amazing to talk to, and he definitely delivers. So thank you
Thank you.
again for being here and for taking time out of your busy life. I'm also the host of Mark My Words, Mark Schmidt. I feel like I always forget to mention I'm the host and what my name is. You just listen to Mark My Words and you just listen to Mark Schmidt talk to Jonathan McLernon. And this was another episode of Mark My Words. I'll see you soon with another one. Bye for now. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Marc Schmidt, or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the Crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.